Barrett.
Taoiseach, the Friends of the Earth report still left out in the cold is just the latest report that we have from either environmental groups or anti-poverty groups who point out that the grant system here for retrofit is massively skewed in favour of the well-off and is of little, if any, use to low-income households and particularly to those in the private rented sector, although also you can say similar things about those in social housing. Private rented tenants have absolutely no say whatsoever over whether they get their house retrofitted and therefore impacted by high energy bills, by cold conditions very often, and obviously with the climate implications. Similarly, in social housing, the rollout of social housing retrofit is glacial. It's absolutely glacial. It's tiny, tiny numbers. So in reality, the grants are going towards the wealthiest people. In fact, the ordinary taxpayer, the low and middle income household, are effectively subsidising the retrofit of rich people's houses. Do you acknowledge that? And have you any intention to do anything about it?
Tobin, I think you're referring to the constituency of Dublin-Rathdown rather than the council area of Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown. As I often say to TDs from all parts of Ireland, there's a lot more to Dublin than Dublin 2, 4 and 6. And I think often people, and I often hear this comment from rural deputies about Ireland beyond the M50. I'm somebody from Dublin who's lived beyond the M50 for almost all my entire life. So I think those of us in Dublin need to get around the country a lot and get to know rural Ireland and every county that's in it. And I make the point of getting to every county at least once a year. But perhaps TDs from outside of Dublin need to get to know Dublin a bit better, because how many know where Dublin 24 is, for example, or Dublin 13. There's a lot more to Dublin than Dublin 2, 4 and 6 or 1, and I can guarantee you that Dublin-Rathdown is not the same place as Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown. But anyway, another day's work. They are great, but there's more to Dublin than Dublin 2, 4 and 6 and 1. So just in relation to the IPCC report, the publication of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change yesterday confirms that with global warming already having reached 1.1 degree centigrade above pre-industrial levels, climate change is causing widespread and increasingly irreversible losses and damages. We have a rapidly closing window of opportunity to maintain a livable future for humanity. The report brings together the latest scientific evidence on climate change solutions to inform policy making at national and international levels. The IPCC has demonstrated that there are options for all sectors to significantly reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. The increased use of renewable energy, improved energy efficiency and fuel switching have reduced global carbon dioxide emissions across global industry and across the energy sector. I look forward to working with our international partners, not just at the next UN climate conference, COP28 in Dubai later this year, but on an ongoing and continual basis. Equity, rights-based approaches and a just transition must also be essential to our actions. Ireland is committed to ensuring that as we increase international finance to ensure developing countries can develop in a climate-friendly way, these funds are aligned with the Paris Agreement's goals, and these funds must be directed at the most vulnerable. Yesterday's report clearly reinforces the message that the time to act is now. The government is doing so, passing one of the most ambitious climate laws in the world and mobilising the public and private sectors to reduce emissions. The Climate Action Plan 2023 sets out in detail how Ireland can accelerate the actions that are needed to respond to this crisis, putting climate solutions at the centre of Ireland's social and economic development. Just in relation to, I think I was asked about our motor vehicle duty and VRT, I had understand that was emissions based. I'll double check on that, but I think that's how it's been redesigned over the past couple of years to make it much more emissions based, so the higher emission vehicles pay higher taxes. On the exploration licences, we're not issuing any new exploration licences and haven't for a number of years, but there are existing ones that are still valid, and it's our view that we will continue to need to use natural gas, perhaps for decades. And natural gas is a much cleaner fuel than coal, which we also use, and oil, which we use on occasion. And it does make sense to see natural gas as a transition fuel. And indeed, we've only signed off, Mr. Ryan has only signed off in recent weeks on the purchase of new gas turbines to guarantee energy security next winter. So for so long as we're using natural gas as a transitional fuel, it does make sense to use it rather than to import it. And there's actually more emissions that arise from bringing gas in from other parts of the world than using our own if we have it. In terms of the electric vehicles, the main investment at the moment is around charging points, which we think is the most appropriate way to invest government resources. There are a number of different bus connects projects, but I understand that a lot of them are now in planning. They're with Bord Pleanála. That goes for Dart Plus as well and for Metro. Really hope that Bord Pleanála can turn those applications around pretty quickly. We've been talking about things like a Metro for Dublin and the Dart expansion really since the 80s or 90s at this stage. We've never got to the point where we're actually in on Bord Pleanála, and I really hope this will be the year where we get railway orders for Dart expansion and for Metro, and we can start building them in the next 2 or 3 years. And the same thing applies to bus connects for Dublin and the other cities, but of course that's a more recent project. On the climate goals, we're not proposing any changes to them. It is 51% reduction by 2030 and net zero by 2050. We will struggle to meet those targets. We all know that, given our expanding population, our expanding economy, our settlement patterns, our agricultural base. All of these things make it much harder for us to achieve those targets than many other countries, but we are committed to doing so, but doing so in a way that is fair and doesn't result in increased unemployment or lower living standards for people. In terms of the retrofit programme, I hear the criticisms from the deputies. I know when we discussed this cabinet committees, Mr. Ryan will tell a very different story, and he'll produce stats and information that shows the retrofit programme is going well with good uptake. And there is special provision around people who qualify for the fuel allowance, and that's a lot of people. The grants that they can receive are much higher than people who don't. And there are, of course, constraints, and we have to acknowledge that there are real constraints because we're asking our construction sector to do so much at the moment. Build loads of new houses, build out public infrastructure, build renewable energy, and then also retrofit other houses. It does create a real constraint on us. And I hear what deputies say about the delays in the applications being processed, and we are working on that.